On the 17th of July 1942, a workman was helping clear the bomb-damaged Vauxhall Baptist Chapel in Kennington Lane, London. It had been bombed during the Blitz on October the 15th, 1940. As over 100 people had been killed during this bombing, the workman wasn't surprised to find a mummified body under the rubble. The body was taken to Southwark Mortuary for examination by pathologist Dr. Keith Simpson. However, on examination, Simpson became suspicious when he detected that the body had already been decapitated, limbs severed. An attempt to burn the corpse was noted. This was clearly a wartime murder. Hi and welcome back to the Historical Crimes and Criminals podcast. I'm Steve, your host. This week I want to say thank you to the historian Dr. Amy Bell for first of all pointing me to this episode and then providing the source material which made it easy to compile. If you enjoy this episode, you'll probably enjoy Amy's book called London Was Ours, Diaries and Memoirs of the London Blitz. An Amazon search under the name Amy Helen Bell should find it. During World War II, the rates of crime soared as the blackout and the rationing created both an opportunity and an increased need for commodities. Frankie Fraser was a career criminal who spent 42 of his 90 years in prison. He tells us that during World War II, he would rob houses while the occupants were in the air raid shelters. In 1941, he was sent to Borstal for breaking an entry in a hosiery store in Waterloo. He was subsequently sent to Wandsworth Prison for shop breaking. The stats back this up, with the official figures in 1941 showing that the Met Police made 5,280 more arrests and recorded 4,681 more indictable offences than it had in 1939. And it wasn't just criminals who would turn to previously unheard of criminal acts. The black market was also responsible for criminalising the ordinary. Everyone had their crafty ways, recalled Tottenham fireman Francis Goddard. It was the only way you could survive. One example was Goddard's wife, who worked in a restaurant where she had access to steak, salmon, and other delicacies. At the end of a hard night, she would wrap up a few choice items in a tissue paper and carry them home, hidden in her knickers. Gangs targeted supply depots and docks. Meat, always in short supply, was a prime target at docks like Liverpool. In 1941, 2,153 beef and lamb carcasses were stolen. Criminals were also known to kit themselves with air raid precaution wardens' helmets and armbands and break into unattended shops. Such was the trust and the respect that the ARP wardens had, was that members of the public would sometimes help them load stolen goods from the shop to the criminals' vehicles. Such was the scale of the problem that in December 1940, Sheffield Assizes set aside 2 days to deal solely with looters, and by 1945, over 100,000 prosecutions had been taken place for black marketeering. Prostitution flourished. The Piccadilly Commandos, as they were nicknamed, plied their trade in Soho catering to the thousands of soldiers about to depart to the front. Everyone was expected to register for employment. You went on the register for either war work or transferred into the services. Prostitution was also a great way of avoiding registering for work, for once a woman was labelled a prostitute, no other woman would want to work with her. Therefore, there was no point in sending her to a factory or anywhere else. It could be argued that they did their war work. Cabaret singer Lawrence Desmond gave a nod to these prostitutes with the lyrics, "Please don't be mean, better men than you have been, to the deepest shelter in town." It soon became known that if you registered as a prostitute, the Ministry of Labour wouldn't have anything to do with you, and it almost became desirable business to be in. They later had a clampdown. It was decided that unless you could produce a receipt from the police, you couldn't be registered as a prostitute. The receipt would be fines for being a prostitute. But they wouldn't mind this and almost regarded it as paying their income tax. Crimes came in all shapes and sizes. 29-year-old Darcy Wilson, a barman from Thornton Heath, was sentenced to 2 months hard labour for impersonating an RAF officer. Having deserted his wife and children, Wilson started wearing the officer's uniform to impress women. He was apprehended when he gave a sloppy salute to a flight lieutenant. At the time, he was days away from bigamously marrying an 18-year-old who believed him to be a test pilot. Some crimes were just opportunistic and vile. When the Café de Paris in central London suffered a direct hit in 1941, rescuers were shocked to find that looters were amongst them, yanking brooches and rings from the bodies of the dead. And other stories were just too tragic to envisage. Ida Rodway was a law-abiding wife in her 60s who lived with her blind husband Joseph, who also suffered from memory loss. In September 1940, they'd been bombed out of their East London home and they were sleeping on Ida's sister's floor, but were nearing the point where they were going to lose their labour money, and Ida was clearly in despair about how they were going to live. Overwhelmed, Ida did what she believed to be the kindest thing in the circumstances, and she cut her husband's throat. She was charged with murder, but was found unfit to plead at the Old Bailey and committed to Broadmoor Psychiatric Hospital, where she would die in 1946. The case led to infrastructures being put in place to support the bombed out families of the UK. And so, with the greater amount of crimes, rubble, and general chaos the Blitz and the war had brought, it presented an opportunity for one husband to rid himself of a troublesome wife. When Dr. Simpson finished his autopsy on the mummified body, he found, as well as the decapitated head in the attempt at burning the body, the limbs had been severed at the elbows and the knees, flesh had been removed from the face, and the lower jaw was missing. Dr. Simpson obtained the permission of the coroner to take the remains back to his laboratory at Guy's Hospital for a more detailed inspection. All tissue had been stripped from the skull, except for a small patch at the rear, which showed brown hairs mixed with grey. The body had also been burnt in several places, and as seen in the medical correspondence in the British Medical Journal during the Blitz, bomb blast did not act that way. Simpson calculated the height and the age. He also x-rayed some remaining soft tissue, and her uterus was found to be full of fibroid tumours. More tellingly, Simpson found a dry blood clot around the upper horn of the right wing of the larynx, indicating bruising and pressure while still alive. Under the bruising was a fracture of the upper horn of the wing, Such small, inspecific injuries, according to Simpson, only occurred in cases of manual strangulation. And so, over the following 3 months, Simpson then turned detective to try and figure out who this murder victim was. On visiting the church, Simpson found a yellowish deposit on the earth, subsequently analysed as slaked lime. This has been used to suppress the smell of putrefaction, but it also had the effect of preventing maggots from fully destroying the body. The body was estimated to have been dead for 12 to 15 months, and with all the collected details, police then searched for missing persons within the speculated timeframe. The police would return to Simpson with a possible name, a description, medical records, and a photograph of a Rachel Dobkin, reported missing by her sister on the 12th of April 1941 after meeting her estranged husband, Harry Dobkin. An interview with her sister produced the information that she was about the right age, with dark greying hair, about 5'1", and had a fibroid tumour. Simpson then used a variety of methods to link the remains to the descriptors he had of the missing woman. He tried out a photography technique first used in the 1936 Buck Ruxton case, and had Mary Newman, the Guy's Hospital photographer, set up superimposed photographs of the skull and the only surviving photograph of Mrs. Dobkin in life. Simpson rejoiced. The portrait fitted the skull like a mask. Mrs. Dobkin's dentist, Barnett Coppin of Stoke Newington, kept meticulous records, and he was able to exactly describe the residual roots and fillings in her mouth. They matched with the upper jaw of the skull. Rachel Dubinsky had married Harry Dobkin in September 1920 through a traditional Jewish custom of a marriage broker. But within 3 days they'd separated, but unhappily 9 months later a baby boy was born. In 1923, Mrs. Dobkin obtained a maintenance order obliging her husband to pay for the upkeep of their child. Over the years, Dobkin defaulted and he was imprisoned several times. In addition, Mrs. Dobkin had unsuccessfully summoned them 4 times for assault. By 1941, Harry had the role of fire watcher in Kennington, and his area included the church. Rachel was still pestering Harry for money, and Harry was to hint later that she was also blackmailing him for some undisclosed indiscretion at work. This may have been the root reason for her murder. On Good Friday, the 11th of April 1941, Dobkin and his wife met in a cafe in Kingsland Road, Shoreditch, near to where he lived in Navarino Road, Dalston. They left at 6:30, and she was never seen alive again, although he claimed that she'd boarded a number 22 bus to visit her mother. The next day, Rachel's sister reported her missing to the police, implicating Harry Dobkin in the process. But because of the priorities of war, Dobkin was not interviewed about the disappearance until the 16th of April. On the night of the 14th of April 1941, a small fire had broken out in the ruined cellar of the Baptist church. This was peculiar because there had been no air raids, and the blaze was only noticed at 3:23 a.m. by a passing policeman. When the fire brigade arrived, Harry Dobkin was there, pretending to put it out. He told the constable that the fire had started at 1:30 a.m. and he hadn't bothered to inform the authorities because there was little danger of the fire spreading. There was also a serious air raid on the next night, so the incident was quickly forgotten. Dobkin was interviewed twice more about his wife's disappearance, and a description and a photograph were circulated by the police, but no further action was taken at that time. And so, over a year later, Harry Dobkin was taken to the Baptist Chapel in Kennington Lane by the police on the 26th of August, 1942. Dobkin strongly denied killing Rachel, but he was arrested for this offence. The trial commenced at the Old Bailey on the 17th of November 1942, and for many in the public, it was a newspaper distraction from constant war stories. Although the body was undoubtedly Rachel's, the evidence against Harry actually perpetrating the murder was circumstantial. There was no witnesses. If the trial was to take place in the 21st century without any supporting DNA or CCTV evidence, then it probably would risk being dismissed by the Crown Prosecution Service, or at best, a plea bargain between prosecution and defence. The prosecution's chief witness was Simpson. He detailed the finding of the bones and the 24 points of identification that he'd found to link the remains with Mrs. Dobkin, including her sex, fibroid womb, her stature, hair colour, her skull matching the photograph, and her dental records. Simpson also put forward the physical proofs for the dismemberment of the body, attempts to burn it, and the evidence showing that the cause of death was from manual strangulation, with an injury to the skull consistent with a fall backwards or having been dashed against the ground by a grip from the front. Moreover, studies had been performed and published in the British Medical Journal that showed that bomb blast shockwave damage victims could not present with the burn pattern found on Rachel. This was clearly a murder. The defence attempted to discredit the evidence, but Simpson presented such a credible witness that it only took the jury 20 minutes of deliberation before they returned a guilty verdict. He was sentenced to be hanged. Harry Dobkin was taken to Wandsworth Prison, where he appealed his conviction on the 12th of January 1943, but this was denied. Shortly before his execution, Dobkin admitted killing Rachel. He had wanted to get rid of her from his life forever. He was executed at Wandsworth Prison on the 27th of January 1943, and ironically, Simpson himself conducted the post-mortem. Simpson would go on to write in his 1978 memoir that the Dobkin case was the sort of case every young pathologist dreams of. His secretary, Molly Lefebvre, called it the case of a lifetime. It certainly had all the ingredients, and, but for the heavy shadow of the war that still hung desperately in the balance, it would have hit the headlines, as Crippen did in Spilsbury's younger days. Well, that's it for another episode of the Historical Crimes and Criminals podcast. I hope you enjoyed that one, and if you did, please subscribe, leave a review, and tell your friends. Pictures of this episode, including the superimposed picture, will be found on the Twitter page on the Historical Crimes and Criminals podcast. Well, I've been Steve, your host. Till next time, bye bye.